Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to my spiel. I'd like to hand it over to our subject matter experts over at Benefits Law Center. We're so grateful to have them join us again, I believe for the third time, to share really important information on federal Social Security disability benefits. And we're just glad that they could make it again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. Yeah. I guess I will start. So my name is Alex Stroud. I am a paralegal here at Benefits Law Center. I've been here for about 3.5 years, almost 4. And I'll introduce Hui.
Yep. My name is Hui Nguyen. I am the Executive Director of Benefits Law Center here in Seattle, Washington. I've been with BLC for about 1.5 years. Prior to this, I was a legal aid attorney at Northwest Justice Project in the King County office and worked at the UW Law School with the Gates Public Service Law Program.
Yeah. And so today we are doing BLC Presents Navigating Social Security and BLC Basics. And sort of the gist of why we're having this, of course, to get in touch with you all about what we do, but also just about the state and situation of Social Security benefits at large, to tell you a little bit about what we do here, what services we provide to our clients and to the community, and how you all can access our services and get in touch with us, partner with us, all those kinds of things as we move forward. So we're going to be talking a lot about what Social Security does. So the SSA refers to the Social Security Administration. What sort of, as things have transitioned in COVID and where they're at now in 2024, what kind of Social Security benefits are available, and then sort of give you an overview of what we do, the services we provide, and how we can support you. And then again, at the end, we'll have some questions available we'll get to answer any questions you may have. Just a heads up, since this is a 101, it will probably be difficult to answer any specific questions, but about specific case situations or situations for your clients. But we would love to answer any general questions and then get connected with you to talk about anything moving forward. So anything to add, Hui? Are we good?
No, just keep in mind that we can't see the chat, or most of us can't see the chat while we're presenting. So if there are questions, if folks can help us out and just read off questions from the chat, that'd be really great. We're going to try to present for maybe 30 minutes and then leave some time for question and answer, but also time for Hillary to present on how you can help as social service providers. And Alex, just let me know when you're ready to toggle between.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. So this is a brief little mini history lesson on Social Security. We bring this up because the context of how Social Security started and where they're at informs a lot of where they are currently. And so a lot of the things your clients or yourself may experience with Social Security is, due to the long history of the organization, the administration and whatnot. So the Social Security Act came around in 1935. It was originally run by a Social Security board, but shortly after, only 10 years later, they renamed it to the administration and elevated it to a level of importance within the executive branch of the federal government, so that it could be used as the goals of what it was to be a very effective anti-poverty program. However, prior to the 1950s, it excluded agricultural workers, domestic workers for racial and sexist reasons. They excluded people from accessing benefits through Social Security, as a way of applying a racist and sexist policy to keep those from accessing the benefits of other workers. That changed in the 50s. But still has residual effects to today. It was granted independence agency in 1995, which just meant that, again, it could be run independently of the federal administration and the executive branch as it was. Currently, there are 60,000 employees, 10 regional offices, including one here in Seattle, and over 1,200 field offices Although those numbers have shrunk from the height of Social Security about 10, 15 years ago, as they consolidated things, which has made the process a little more difficult, just from what I've heard about Social Security. So either way, at the end of the day, currently, it is still the most effective anti-poverty program. But as I mentioned, there are clear inequities, including immigration status of this state. And because of their long history of discriminatory practices, they still last to today. So that is the Social Security Administration. Go ahead, Lee. So what we're going to talk about today is what they do and how it might look for our clients out in the world, and how they're experiencing it. So Social Security is the federal government's financial safety net through SSI, SSDI. We'll talk about the differences between those, what those are. It sets up your retirement plans, your disability benefits, retirement benefits, and survivors benefits. For those of spousal benefits included in those survivors benefits. All that stuff is administrated through the Social Security Administration. Also is the place that holds Social Security numbers, Social Security cards, your most specific and valuable piece of information to track your work through your life, and also all of your other benefits and so forth. So yeah, so it does a lot, but we'll talk specifically today about disability benefits, because that, I think, is the most important part to focus on for our clients and the populations that you all serve. Okay, so initially this was a Social Security during COVID slide, and now that we are obviously not past COVID, but have moved into a different phase of whatever COVID is at this point, we have changed it to Social Security now. And that's because Social Security went under a pretty significant change and challenge during COVID. Obviously, as we all know, people moved to working from home. The field offices at Social Security were closed from March of 2020 to April of 2022. So that's 2 years of field offices being closed to the public for access. So they have since reopened, as it says here, in April 2022. Wait lines are very long to go to the office still. That hasn't changed. And that's because the biggest thing that happened to Social Security during COVID is they have lost a ton of their workforce or transitioned a ton of their workforce, as they are very now much less experienced workforce. And just from the stories that I have heard within the Social Security offices, it takes a few years to learn all of the rules and to execute all of the practices when you work at Social Security. And so, as you can imagine, if people have left, lots of people, and they had to hire lots of new people, we're still only 2 years in since they've opened the field offices. And so, from our experience here at BLC, it is still, a very young, new workforce there, and still understaffed. And so the biggest issue with Social Security offices are long delays. Telephone, getting a hold of them on the phone, it's gotten better, but still hit or miss, depending on how you're getting hold of them. You can expect long delays on the phone as well. The one thing that has improved since we've done this last training is that the hearings office, they are scheduling hearings in person and remote more faster than we have experienced before. I think right now they're scheduling hearings in late April. So you can expect they're giving you about 3 months. At one point it was more closer towards 6 months. So those have sped up. But Social Security is still relying heavily on their website to process any appeals, to process applications. So, again, another barrier to our clients that we work with.
Thanks, Alex. I'm going to go over the types of non-disability benefits that a person can get. There's a lot more towards the design of Social Security and how it's meant to exclude people to make it as difficult as possible to access benefits. And so we'll talk more about that in a second. But just an overview of the non-disability benefits that one could receive. First off, there's Social Security retirement based on the individual's work history. This also depends on the age, depending on when you take retirement and how much you can get. If you wait till 70 to get the maximum amount in terms of benefits, those are all things that are related to Social Security retirement. There's old age supplemental SSI. We'll explain what the difference between SSI and Social Security disability in a minute, but it's based on age over 65 and financial requirements, income, and resource. For retirement and also Social Security disability is not needs-based. And so that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at the differences between SSI, supplemental security income, and general Social Security. There's spousal benefits, so retirement benefits on your spouse's records if you are over age 62 and your spouse is receiving benefits up to half of your spouse's benefits amounts. And then there's survivor benefits for family members of deceased persons qualified for benefits. That's usually children or a spouse. Those are all things that someone could get under survivor's benefits. And the main types that we handle, although we do, encounter the other types that are non-disability related, and we do handle some of those cases, these are the main ones that we handle through Benefits Law Center, and see a lot of different demographics who are experiencing different barriers and different levels of difficulty in accessing these benefits. So generally we think, if you qualify, you can apply, get the benefit, and everything will be okay. That's not the case. It's quite the journey to actually apply and be approved for disability benefits. It's a long journey, very long, anywhere between 2 to 3 years sometimes. We've seen clients who are up to 6 years waiting. And then the other aspect to it is once you're through the door, you think it's a happy ending, but it's not. It's an ongoing responsibility and requirement to report certain things and to engage in certain ways under the rules and regulations. And many people who get on actually are looking at risk of being terminated or having their payments reduced, or looking at overpayments, sometimes in the $50,000 to $100,000 level. But those are things that are very problematic for many of our clients to navigate, especially if they experience barriers related to poverty. The first one is SSI. So individuals who meet income and resource limits and the medical eligibility requirements. There's no work history required. So for SSI, like I said, there's no work history required. So if someone does not have a work history, for example, if they have a developmental disability and were born with a developmental disability and have very little or to no work history as an adult because of that disability, then that is something someone who would, if they're applying for disability benefits, would get SSI. They would have no work history, as opposed to someone who does have a work history. So this is for Social Security disability insurance. It's for individuals that earn enough work credits and meet medical eligibility requirements. So work history is required. What we like to say for Social Security disability is that, for example, if you're a multi-billionaire, like Jeff Bezos or some other very Elon Musk, if you have a lot of money, as long as you have the work history, if you become medically disabled according to SSA standards, you can still receive Social Security based on your work credits and your disability. So it's not based on what you have in terms of mansions or yachts. It is based on your work history. So that's the biggest difference between SSI and SSD, which is SSD is work history, SSI is needs-based, no work history. There's also disabled adult child benefits for adult children who became disabled before 22 years old and have a parent who's receiving retirement or disability benefits. That is usually seen to protect adult children with disability benefits or disability status. And so making sure that they're receiving the correct amount and benefits so that they can have income stability. Alex, I believe this is mine, or is this yours? I can't remember the slides that we assigned to each other.
Yeah, this is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so who qualifies? So I mentioned this really briefly. So for SSI, in that left column or left table, you could see age 65 or older. If you're blind or meet Social Security definition of disabled, we'll go over that in a couple minutes here. When we talked about needs-based, the biggest barrier or problem for folks who receive SSI is whether or not you have resources that are at a certain amount and there's a limit. The limit is $2,000. What is a resource? There's a lot of different things that can or can't be considered to be a resource. For example, if you live in a home that you own and you're living in it as your primary homestead, that is usually exempt as a resource. However, if you own a vacation home that you don't live in as your primary house or home, that is not considered exempt, and that will be counted in terms of the equity value of that home based on the vacation home. And if it's over $2,000, which it most likely is if you own a vacation home, then what will happen is that you are no longer eligible for SSI. Again, this is the biggest problem that we experience from our clients who come from pretty much vulnerable populations, whether they're refugees, elderly, children, homeless, dealing with substance addiction or mental health. These are the biggest barriers, I believe, in regards to eligibility. Income is the other one. So folks are able to work up to a certain amount. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the resource one is usually one where we see a lot of people get in trouble. So for example, Alex mentioned COVID during times of COVID. So Social Security actually got sued just recently and settled for how they handled eligibility cases during COVID. And there was many instances that impacted thousands of people across the US because they were unable to report or comply with certain regulations. So for example, there was an example in the lawsuit that was used where an 80-year-old woman who did not have access to computers or technology got additional money in the bank account, and she was unable to go to the bank and say, hey, I need to withdraw that or spend it. So she was basically stuck. And what happened, as an example, was that Social Security terminated her during the pandemic. That means her benefits were cut off. And if it was for a certain period of time, she would be looking at each month that she was over the $2,000 limit. She was ineligible for benefits. And so they failed to follow certain guidance and policy guidance on COVID. So they recently negotiated a settlement, and thousands of people across the US should be getting notices soon if they were cut off or had their benefits reduced or had an overpayment, that they would be made whole again as a result of that lawsuit. So those are just some examples of how tricky the resource limit can be. There are also immigration status requirements. So they must meet special requirements to qualify. It can't be undocumented. And the word alien is used here from the regulations. We don't believe in using that word to identify people who are non-citizens, but that's the technical legal language that is used. And there's also certain criteria. This could be its own training. Refugees and asylees do qualify for Social Security based on certain statuses. And so that's a whole other training that maybe we can give later on to our community partners. But it is rather tricky about who can qualify, who can't. And here on the SSDI side of the table, on the right side, you have to meet the definition of disability, which we'll talk. There's a 5-step process. You have to have sufficient work credits. You can usually find your work credits to Social Security either on your paycheck. So you can see on there what was taken out for Social Security. You can also go to the Social Security website to check and see how many credits yet you have on your account online, and that will tell you how many credits you have and what constitutes a work credit. So that's about 1410 in a quarter. So that's a work credit, one work credit. And there's certain age requirements with Social Security disability. And when we're looking at the flat rates in terms of how much a person can get, in 2024, it is for SSI, it's about $943 for an individual and $1,415 for eligible individual and eligible spouse. Social Security disability, SSDI, depends on what you worked or put into the system. And so again, if you want to log in and take a look at your own account to see how much you potentially could get based on your work history and credits, it varies. And that's how we know if someone is on SSI or SSDI. There are instances where someone can receive mixed, which can be confusing. But generally, when we see the 943 amount or 1415 amount, and of course, these amounts go up every year to take into account for inflation and adjustments for cost of living. So it used to be 914, so it's now 943 this year. So last year, 2023, was a lower amount, so it's gone up. But when we see this amount, we instantly know this person is receiving SSI, and there are additional rules that person has to follow to order to maintain their benefits. And that's why we exist, because there are so many rules and regulations. It's such a Byzantine process where you can get easily lost. So helping folks understand to navigate to keep their benefits, because for people who receive SSI, we're usually talking about folks from populations such as disability, elderly, youth, folks who are refugees, asylees, who may not speak English. And so for one financial crisis as a result of having been cut off or reduced, that can be a spiral of an intersection of a lot of different other legal problems, such as housing eviction. They may experience problems with their Medicaid, which usually comes with the package for SSI. We're not going to talk about Medicaid right now. That's its own hour. And then SSDI is going to be different because it's going to be higher. It can be anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 based on the person's work history. But those are the main differences between the two. Alex, this is your slide, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, and as we went through that, understanding some of those basic rules are important in trying to figure out what is going on with our clients' Social Security problems, or in general, like what is happening in this person's, with their benefits. So we break them up into two different categories. We call them eligibility or entitlement cases. These are cases about people getting onto benefits who haven't received benefits and need to begin receiving benefits. They're disabled. They're going through the application process. They have been denied and need to appeal and go to a hearing in front of a law judge and start their benefits and go through that whole process. Again, this process can take the shortest time frames, 9 months to a year, sometimes multiple years if it takes a lot of appeals and whatnot, and depending on how connected clients can stay on their case. It takes a decent amount of time. So we have those cases, eligibility entitlement cases, and those are separate than what we call post-entitlement cases. And those are cases for people who are receiving benefits and now have an issue with their benefit. It's been stopped or terminated. There's an overpayment notice. It has been reduced because of certain, rules from Social Security, or they're going through a continuing disability review, which happens every 3 to 5 years for recipients of SSI or SSDI. So they do a check again on your benefits every 3 to 5 years. And so sometimes if we lose touch with a client or a client moves and the address doesn't get changed with Social Security, they reach out to them and ask them some questions they need to answer. They can't answer. They obviously never received the form, so they can't answer them. Social Security will cut them off for those benefits because they never heard from them. And so these are just kind of the cases. We take all of these kinds of cases. And the reason why we break it up this way is because just to, foreshadow a little bit about what we'll talk about down the line. But the only sorts of attorneys that exist outside of BLC in the private bar that work on Social Security cases, they only work on eligibility or entitlement cases. That's it. There's a back pay portion that is awarded to attorneys at that point, and that's how they fund their law practices. And that's the only cases they take. There is no back pay portions for post-entitlement cases. And so for us here at Benefits Law Center, this is a priority of ours of taking these cases. We know how damaging it could be to people's lives when they lose their disability benefit out of the blue and then have to go talk to Social Security, which is a very hard process to go through. And they all of a sudden just lost their only source of income. And so we focus a lot of our work on those post-entitlement cases, knowing that there's not private attorneys out there, and that this is really damaging to a client's life, obviously, as they just lose their income at some point. So go ahead. So just to give a little bit of overview of these, so this we'll send the slides out, of course, with this, so this you can refer to this at some other point, but just want to give you an overview of what they look like, just in case if a client ever comes to you and says, hey, like, I don't know what's going on with my benefits, like, can you help me figure this out? You can see, so there's 3 different kinds, like we talked about. So there's an overpayment. In overpayment cases, a client will get a written notice that says that we paid you a certain amount of money too much in benefits, and we are going to start to recover that money back. And so usually there's an explanation in there of the amount, what months they overpaid you, and why. And so a client has an option to appeal that decision, of course, disagreeing with the fact or the amount. You can file a reconsideration, file a waiver, those are kind of getting into the weeds about that stuff. But the gist is that a client can appeal the decision and either ask for Social Security to make a different decision, or file for a waiver, which just says that it wasn't my fault and I can't afford to repay it. Or if that all doesn't work out, there's an option to go through a repayment plan. Either way, there are options for clients at this level to work with Social Security to find a way to keep their benefit as long as they're still eligible, and appeal the decision in the meantime, and or get onto a payment plan so that they hold on to their benefit and repay the overpayment part slowly over a long period of time. So there's options for clients when they get an overpayment notice. Many times clients show up and are, of course, nervous and worried and crisis about their situation, worried that their benefit's going to get taken fully away. And so we walk through our clients with these about what their options are, what might be best for their situation, and how to move forward. The other options are, so you could also have an issue of a termination or cessation of your benefits. These are usually because you have moved from out of eligibility. You were eligible, you're now out of eligibility because you have, say, if you're on SSI, you have more than $2,000 in resources, or you have an income that's higher than the allowable amount. Or if you're on SSDI, that you are your work is over what we call substantial gainful activity, which is an amount of money that SSDI recipients can receive through work each month. It's $1,550 for the year of 2024. So you can work part-time as an SSDI recipient. You cannot work for make more than $1,550 a month. So here's some other reasons in there. So resources, income, out of the country. So if you're out of the United States for more than 30 days, you're ineligible to receive SSI. Even incarcerated, or say you move into a skilled nursing care or long-term care facility, again, if you are getting your housing and food paid through some other support services, Social Security will take your benefits away for those reasons. So SSDI, work, no longer disabled, you're incarcerated, again, all of those things. So Social Security is required to send you a notice that explains the situation to you, with all that information saying we have found X, Y, and Z. And then they has every notice that comes that are these kinds of notices comes with the appeal information. It will say many times in there, you have 60 days to appeal the decision. And so, so those are all in those notices. Those notices are many times difficult to understand or read, especially if you're unfamiliar with Social Security, but at least the appeal information is in there. So make sure you have that. It's 60 days usually from the date of the appeal. So that, just tells you how long the client has to get their things together to possibly appeal a decision. The last thing on here, continuing disability review. Every 2 to 7 years, every Social Security is supposed to review your case for disability review. From our experience here, if you're still continuing to see the doctor, you go through those processes. It is kind of a simple check on your disability. However, if you lose touch with Social Security and they send you a notice asking we're doing the review and they don't hear from you, or you haven't been going to the doctor in the time between when you were awarded benefits to when they do the review, that's usually when it becomes more of an issue. And so we do work with those kinds of people, of course, as they come in. And many times folks that are experiencing homelessness or have complicated living situations, they will just lose touch with Social Security, and then it becomes a bigger process to get re-engaged with Social Security to get their benefits turned back on. Okay. So the last thing here is just to talk about some eligibility cases. So here is the definition of disability according to Social Security. So I'm just going to read it out loud so you all can hear it. But this will always be here on the slide, so you can come back to it. So the definition of disability for Social Security is inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity because of a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months, and results in not being able to perform past work or any work in the national economy. And so you can see we've highlighted some of the big important parts of this definition. And this is usually what comes up against for people trying to get onto benefits. Substantial gainful activity, again, that means that you can make upwards of $1,550 a month. So basically they're saying if your disability doesn't hinder your ability to make about $1,550 a month, then your disability is not severe enough for them. And so it says in here, so expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. So it has to be some long period of time, of course. And you're not able to perform any past work. So the job that you most recently did, or any work, any job that they feel based on your impairments of your disability that you could perform in the national economy. So whether that's an available job here in Seattle or not, they're saying any job in the national economy. And so that's how Social Security determines their eligibility of disability. And so you can see, that it has like high barriers to reach for people with disabilities. So it's really tied to how an individual's ability to work. And again, this is the legal definition. This is not what we value or what we take into consideration when we work with people. But this is what we communicate to people when we say, if you want to apply for benefits, this is what the definition you're trying to reach. And then the table here on the right is really important because a lot of people, I think, feel that, you're just going to get denied on your initial applications. Everybody does. It takes many appeals in order for you to ever get benefits. While that is true that the process is really cumbersome and hard and long for a lot of people, they do allow, I think, more than people assume. And so it is sometimes worth it to just go ahead and do the application, send it in, get a result from them. As you can see, it's 37% allow at the first level. The second level, which is an appeal, so you start with the application on the first level. The second level is just an appeal, and that is an appeal within the same office of Social Security. Somebody else at the office will look at the case for you, make a decision. So they allow a 13% more. The third level is where a lot of times attorneys step in. This is the administrative law judge hearing level. As you can see, you go to in front of a judge and do a hearing. 45% allowable. So you can see it is, it tiers up a little bit at each level, allowing a little bit more. Those last two levels is the appeals council, which is a level past the administrative law judge. And then a federal court decision is the very last one. We take cases up to that third level. So we take, application, appeal, and hearing levels. We don't take cases past the appeals council or to the federal court attorneys. We do take our cases at the appeals council level if we did the hearing with them, but we don't take cases that start for us that we see initially at the appeals council. So.
All right, and I'm just going to talk about some of the services that BLC provides in regards to the scope of legal services that when we work with a client. So there's two parts of what we do in terms of departments or organizations within our organization. There's SAAP, Social Security Advocacy Project, and then DHAP with the Disabled Homelessness Advocacy Project. And SSAP is on post-eligibility cases, a focus on post-eligibility cases to help people stay and maintain their benefits to keep themselves on. And then DHAP is more for eligibility for people who are experiencing houselessness or homelessness. In terms of eligibility for Social Security, a lot of places, and especially for housing or public housing, do have some requirement that you have to meet a formal definition of disability. And so that is something that I think is really important for a lot of folks to be able to get on. Because it comes with as a package. So for SSI, you automatically get Medicaid or qualify for Medicaid if you're found eligible for SSI. It's a bit different for Social Security disability. There's a spend down process to qualify for medical coverage. But those are things that to think about, which is once that formal definition of disability, that government definition, which is very disconnected with reality, as we know, it's more of a legal thing, which a lot of things are disconnected or become a legal fiction, but it is disconnected from reality. But once you meet that legal fiction of I am now disabled under the government's definition, you do qualify for other types of things such as public housing, get to jump the queue for the waiting list for public housing. For food, there's a special food program for people with disabilities, WashCap. And then for Medicaid, that's another issue. So it comes as a lot of different intersectional types of things that you can qualify for. Then, so that's why it's really important for folks who are at the brink of homelessness or houselessness to be able to get the benefit and maintain their housing. And once they're in, if they get cut off, if they're paying rent and they get cut off, that's a huge risk to their housing and income stability. But here we have different levels of service based on what the person is experiencing. The first one is advice counsel. That's where we just need to be able to go out and troubleshoot what they're looking at in regards to the different types of problems someone can experience. There's brief service. So brief service usually includes not full representation, but we do handle a little bit of certain aspects of the case, such as research, calling Social Security with the person just to make sure that they get through, helping them file an appeal just to make sure their deadlines are preserved. Or it may include research and negotiations with Social Security. And if they were able to resolve the case without having to go to a hearing or go to court, that's basically what we want to do. And then, of course, there's full representation. Usually these are both types of cases for both post-eligibility and eligibility cases where we represent the person in an administrative hearing. We may or may not present witnesses, cross-examination, direct testimony, all those types of things in front of an administrative law judge. And so those are all the scope of things that we provide. Usually because there's only 5 of us, there's 5 attorneys that are actively taking on cases and 2 paralegals and myself and the person in development. But that means that when you look at the numbers of who's on Social Security, usually that's around 44,000, depending on whatever the current census or population is, about 44,000 approximately in King County. And I believe it's anywhere between 140,000 and to 160,000 of folks receiving Social Security statewide. And of those people, 5 of us cannot handle all those cases, even the 40,000. So we do have to triage. That means when we get a case, we have to look at what are the priorities. Is that person being at risk of homelessness? Are they elderly? Are there children involved? And so we need to decide, because like a triage, like an emergency room, we need to decide what level of services can we offer the person without being completely overwhelmed with a lot of different cases. We are the main provider of Social Security benefits, post-eligibility and eligibility for services, legal services. There are other boutiques, there are other advocates out there statewide, but they're very small in number. And so we're basically the biggest game in town in regards to Social Security matters on this. And so we do have to triage, prioritize the cases to decide which cases have merit, which cases need just advice counsel or need a little bit more than that. Again, these are some of the barriers that we talked about really quick. Homelessness. So being able to contact our client is a really big issue. And also helping people remain engaged with the process. So one takeaway that you'll want to take, if you remember, we're throwing a lot of information at you right now in this very limited amount of time. But we want you to, the one takeaway from Social Security, if anything, and I don't mean to disparage or talk down to an organization that's trying to do its best, that's very underfunded, but the status of Social Security right now is very similar. I'm not going to name the name, but any type of budget airline. So a metaphor. So if you buy from a budget airline, you show up to your ticket, to your flight, you go up to the counter and they tell you, sorry, your flight is canceled. It's now rescheduled to 5 days away. We don't care. We have your money. You can complain. We're not going to pay for your meals or your hotel. You're just stuck with a plane ride that's 5 days away that we rescheduled and canceled on you. Basically, they have your money. They don't care. They don't care about the inconvenience. They don't care about whatever is going on in your life or the collateral consequences that could happen if you can't make that flight. It's pretty much the same thing with Social Security. You can receive a notice. It makes no sense or it's incorrect. You're like, I did not make that amount of money. And you would think, if I just take this as Social Security, I can get my benefits. I can get my benefits turned right back on that very same day I go to the office. That's not the case. Many times you're waiting months for a response. Sometimes you'll submit documents or a fax and they say, we don't have it. You are waiting hours on the phone, like Alex talked about. You are getting wrong information from the front desk. So people will get inconsistent information. So it's very much like, by design, a bad budget airline that doesn't care what happens to you, but you, in terms of justice, have been wronged. by their incorrect decisions sometimes. And you think it'd be very easy to go in and turn or flip a switch to fix it. And it's not. It's by design. It's built to keep people out. It's built to keep people, guessing in terms of what's happened to your benefits. And so you could do everything correct. And so Hillary's going to talk about the ways that you can try to navigate this process as best as possible. But for people who are homeless and houseless, living outside, having access to mail, remaining engaged with the process, which could take years, is a really big, difficult thing to do, because in the meantime, they're getting very little benefits or ways to survive. Of course, physical impairments is a big one. Mental cognitive impairments can make it difficult to remember certain things. Transportation. So there are field offices throughout King County and the state, but many of these places can be difficult to get to, especially for folks with mobility issues. Access to technology is a big one. So for folks that need to file online or need to communicate online, they don't have access to internet or a computer that can be able to do that. Limited English proficiency. So for folks who are recent refugees or just refugees in general, but we do see a big population of Ukrainian, Afghanistan, people from Iran who are recent refugees who don't speak English, but are eligible for SSI or Social Security Disability, depending on their work history. But we do see a barrier because many of the notices are not, there's no notices are translated. No notices are translated. In fact, we talked to folks in Yakima who practice there, say they don't even do it in Spanish. We thought they were doing it in Spanish, but they don't even do that. And so that's something that, if you can imagine getting a letter that you can't understand that is saying you need a report or you need to come in by a certain date, but you don't understand to do that, you're looking at being terminated from your benefits, or that's your basic income. And then also social support, being able to navigate a lot of the process. So part of our mission, vision, values is to go out to where people are at. So making sure that we're available. We do a lot of outreach at DESC. We do it at Mary's Place, the Seattle Chiefs Club, and also King County Veterans Programs soon to be up north again and south, and also at Open Doors, which is for multicultural families with developmental disabilities in Kent. So those are places that we set up shop to make sure that folks in the community can access us, because we know the different barriers. So being able to set up a relationship with our clients. Many times we do get referrals sometimes from private attorneys who can't manage the barriers of their clients, but we understand that. And so we work with those clients with the barriers where they're at to try to best help them navigate through the process. We have many community partners. Some of them I just mentioned, but other community partners, legal aid agencies, social service providers. Solid Ground is another one that we really collaborate and partner with. But it really is a tag team effort where we've identified we need to get this person on Social Security. The social service provider said we need to help this person find housing. And then medical providers should get medical coverage and access to healthcare. So it's not just a way, we don't operate in a siloed way. We operate in tandem with our partners to work as a tag team to get the person all the things that they need holistically to survive. And then the Justice Bus. So we decommissioned the Justice Bus this past year, but we will be getting a new Justice Bus. And what basically a Justice Bus is a bus that's retrofitted to be a legal office where we can go out to the community where people don't have to spend 2 hours on the bus to get to us or on a light rail to get to us. And that means going out to different places, Social Security offices, parking lots, tiny villages, a lot of tent cities that might be able to access us. So going out in the community to make sure that folks are able to access our services and are able to reach us without having to come to our office. So how you can help, so definitely trainings, how we can help, trainings. We definitely are open to different types of trainings. Again, there's a lot of different problems that can be experienced as a result of getting on or staying on Social Security. We can try to answer very specific questions. Generally, this may require an attorney-client relationship, but those are things that we can help you decide whether or not this requires a full-on advice counsel type of a situation. We can help with referrals, and also we can develop formal partnerships. And so those are all things that we can definitely participate as partners in and help each other out. This is our contact information. And so another way to get through to us is the information email address. So it's just information@benefitslawcenter.org. But if you email one of us, we can make sure that the email will get to the proper person for potential intake.
Yeah, that's info at
info. Yeah, sorry, not information.
Yeah,
it comes off as it's so it's info. I'm sorry, info info@benefitslawcenter.org.
Yeah.
Alex, any other things you want to say?
No, I want to leave it up to questions, and so we also give Hillary some time. So
awesome. Well, we had a few comments and questions get thrown into the chat. Hillary, as usual, is wonderful about answering them in the chat, and to capture them into the recording, I'm going to go ahead and read them and the answers as well. But first off is, a lot of folks living unsheltered or unhoused. Their address changes, they've got, different phones because they're losing their phones. And so one person was asking when they're trying to help their clients begin the process for applying for SSI SSDI online, they find they're locked out of their online process because they can't remember old passwords, phone numbers, addresses. Is there an efficient way to have their online accounts reset?
Did Hillary answer this question? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay. Yeah, so Hillary might be the best person to answer this because she has actually done this sort of work. But I have found it difficult to reset the passwords and stuff. It's inefficient. Social Security is worried about password protections or fraud, or I guess, and so they make it really difficult to reset those. I would be curious to see what Hillary says, but I think having to go to the office or something, you have to get in touch with Social Security, so either the phone or going to the office to get them to reset it. They can do that; they've done it before, but there's not an efficient way.
Yeah, Alex, I've specifically asked this question to the regional director because it's not easy, and especially when somebody has been locked out because they set it up based on an email address. And I find, when I've tried to help clients set up an account, which I rarely do because it just doesn't work because they don't even know, what email was set up. So if you do help a client do that, be cautious, make sure they know how to get back into it. They're using an email that they know how to access. But I think I've been told you need to go into the office and provide identification documents, which is difficult for a lot of people. So I don't think there is an easy way, unfortunately.
And just as an anecdote, I cannot access my own account. So I had to replace my Social Security card to get this job because my passport was expired. And so I had problems even getting in, and I still to this day don't think I've resolved it. So it's tricky.
Okay, well, great question. I am really appreciating the honest and transparent, like, this is an issue and we're aware of it and we're trying to work through it. That's really helpful to have that level setting, so folks know it's not just them or something that they don't know. So this is one Hillary answered, so I will go ahead and just read it out loud. So sometimes my clients ask me to help them get records to submit with their application. Is this something that SSA is okay with, or do they want to receive the records directly from the source, for example, a doctor's office or a psychiatrist? And Hillary said, although SSA DDS will request records based on information the claimant gives in application and forms, claimants can submit records as well. And your support in helping gather support materials is a great service to your client. And Hillary is going to go in a little bit more in depth about that in her presentation in a minute. So that's great.
Well, sorry, Jody, again, I just, this is to go back to what we talked about, just the question before, but I also wanted to just add, I think one of, obviously, we are very aware of kind of the issues that Social Security is having, being efficient and processing people's disability application. And so that's part of what we do, is to help validate the experiences that our clients are experiencing, and you all as well, as you go through the process, because it's important to understand that, like, this is not something that's specific to you or your client, that this is a system-wide process that Social Security is experiencing, but also because as we go through, we learn about a client situation, it's important to figure out like where it's maybe best for them to try to resolve their issue. You know, if this is a client that is going to have trouble keeping track of an email address, that we really maybe don't want to go through that process of setting up an online account for them, because we know that like this is going to be difficult. And so that's some of the stuff that we do just from our experience here is, you know, based on the client situation and circumstances, we decide like, is this a client that we need to be with the entire process through, or is this a client who can handle an email address and set up an online account? And so then we'll encourage them to go through that process. And so that's some of the legwork that we do and we're willing to do. And so again, part of this training hopefully is that like if you have those questions or need those kinds of answers, feel free to send them to us. That's what we do. It's just our experience, you know, brings light to that.
Great, thank you. And that's kind of a nice lead into, I think, parts of the next question. And Hui, I think you were speaking to this as well. But many clients can't navigate this process on their own, and they get assigned an attorney by their community mental health agency. You know, how can clients assess the level of quality the attorneys they are assigned? I think you spoke to the question of like, you know, you all need to be mindful in how many and what types of clients you're taking on. But does BLC, once they've chosen a client, like help them through the whole process, just at the appeal? And how hands-on are you with working with folks? So I know you spoke a little bit to that, but maybe just add a little flavor.
Yeah. So definitely, like I said, we have to triage it because we can't take every case because there's very limited numbers. And it's similar to being on a lifeboat. We can only pull out certain people from the ocean. And if we pull out too many people on the boat, it sinks. And so that's not where we want to be. So we do have to prioritize and triage the cases in terms of priority of what's at risk, what are some aspects that might make it more difficult for the person because of barriers, right? So we do identify very openly about what level or scope of services we provide. So when we first meet with the client, we're very open about what exactly are we committed to, and we make it unequivocally clear whether we decide to take a case to the end, right, to the hearing, or if we have identified that the legal issue is not something we can resolve, right, based on what we look at as lawyers. And so we tell the client, here's all we're agreeing to do. So there should be a very clear understanding of the scope of legal services that we provide, whether it's AC, advice counsel, brief service, or full rep. And we also make sure to know when the relationship has ended, because it's a formal relationship that has ethical requirements that we could lose our license if we don't follow. So we make sure to close out the case after we're done to let the client know. When they're working with an attorney, to know if you have a good attorney or not, that's something we experience a lot. We experience a lot of private attorneys who are not qualified. They may be qualified as attorneys, but they're not qualified to work with people who have very many barriers or don't know how to handle those barriers because of lack of education or cultural or incompetency, right? So all those things, I think, are tells of a bad lawyer. The biggest one is going to be if your lawyer doesn't get back to you within a timely way. I try to get back to my clients within 24 hours, even if it's, I don't know, let me look into it, right? But making sure that the attorney is responsive, that the attorney understands the scope, that the attorney shows up to the hearing. We've had that issue happen before where the attorney doesn't show up, right? Or I've experienced that where the private attorney doesn't show up. And so all those things, I think, to be careful when working with an attorney, that they were responsive, that they explain the scope to you, they explain the process to you. We are semi-hands-on. I think we do try to go out of our way to make sure that we acknowledge our clients' barriers and meet them where they're at and try to accommodate them as best as possible so they can remain engaged. But like I said, there are attorneys out there that are not great. And so if you don't have to stay with your attorney, but I think the trick is finding another attorney. You can fire your attorney. That's something that you can do. But I think responsiveness and making sure that they should never be able to say, I can guarantee you will get this, because there's no guarantees in law. We always have backups and plan Bs or Cs or Ds often. And so making sure that the attorney is responsive and is clear in their communication and scope.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I'll just add, so what it looks like for full representation for us here is that, we sign some documents to say that we're your attorney, a retainer, and what we call 1696, which is a representation form for Social Security. And so then Social Security is required to send us notices when they also send them to the client. And so the reason why, that relationship is successful, and we choose that limitedly, obviously, is because of, we can't do that for everybody. But we reserve that for people we know are going to have difficulty staying with the process, are homeless, don't have a mailing address, a regular mailing address, or a phone that they can reliably answer Social Security calls. And so this is a way to direct those the communication from Social Security to us so that we can do that work. And so that's what it looks like to be a full representation. And it also includes gathering medical records when we need to. It also includes writing a brief, basically, which is an argument for why we believe this person should get these disability benefits. So that's what it looks like to be full rep. To be everything else, AC or brief representation, it's just we'll meet with you as many times as needed to complete whatever task we're doing, but that's all that we can do at this moment. And then a lot of times we're like, hey, if more issues come up, please call us again. We'll go through the process again.
Thank you both. So I'm going to just quickly read the last question that Hillary also answered in the chat, and then I'm going to hand it over to Hillary so you have enough time for your section. But we did have the question of what if you miss the 60 days to appeal? And it says you can appeal late, but you have to provide SSA with a good cause for late filing. And that means you must explain why you missed that deadline. For example, I was unhoused, I didn't get the notice, I was in the hospital, and I need to appeal now, and I have a case manager helping me, etc. So that the person can do that through a form called the Statement of Claimant, and it's form SSA-795, and this is in the chat, and Tim will surely be capturing this in our blog. So that is a possibility, and there's just a way to do that. And then Hillary, I'm going to hand it over to you to dive in and address Daniela's question that was put in the chat, because it sounds like you're going to go over it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jody. Okay. So what I wanted to go over today is, and my information will also be at the end of the slide, so you can have my email and my phone number, but how you as case managers or community advocates can help your clients with these various issues. And a lot of these issues happen when you're trying to apply at eligibility, and a lot of them happen after you get benefits. There's a lot of stuff that happens. So when you apply, I'm gonna go over a little bit of basics, although Alex and we did a great job of setting the stage. So some of the questions you asked were really on point, and we're going to get into those details. But the big takeaway, we kind of mentioned it, is that as case managers, community advocates, supports, you can help your client stay engaged in the process. Even when I, as the attorney, am involved and am fully representing the client, I find that often they're even more successful when there's also a case manager or some other community support involved as well. Especially for those clients that have multiple barriers, like they're unhoused and have mental health impairments and things like that. So we're going to talk about how you can support your claim, the client's claim, and we're going to talk about after they get their benefits, how do you help them keep their benefits and avoid issues with Social Security. We already talked a little bit about the differences in the programs, but I just wanted to highlight that if you're not sure and you're helping somebody apply, you don't know if they have enough work credits. If you can get into the My SSA account, it will tell you how, if they have work credits, if they're eligible for the disability insurance that we talked about before. But if you're not sure, you can apply for both. And there's scenarios where somebody could get both, where their disability insurance amount is not enough to meet that max SSI amount. As we said, the max SSI amount for this year is $943. So if, for example, the claimant's disability insurance is only $500, they can get SSI, the difference to get up to the max amount. Now, we did go over this slide. I updated the numbers for 2024. So, you're earning work credits. If you are working, you're earning work credits. You can get one per quarter. And in 2024, if you earn $1,730 in a quarter, you've earned a work credit. So all of us are earning work credits. We're paying into our retirement. But if you're disabled before retirement age, even before early retirement age, you can apply for disability insurance. And that is the same as what your full retirement benefit would be. And you're just accessing early if you meet the disability requirement. So that's just one other difference I wanted to highlight. We mentioned, or Alex defined the definition earlier. We talk about it in Social Security about being a 5-step sequential process. So Social Security is going to look at, they have a very specific frame on how they're going to define whether they believe somebody has a disability. We know that in different settings, like we all define it in a different way. Personally, you may define your own impairments in a specific way. And different agencies have a different definition, but Social Security is very specific. And so we always try to help our client understand what Social Security is looking at. So also they feel validated. Well, you know, we agree with you that you do feel that you have impairments that prevent you from working, but we also need to frame it in a way that Social Security is going to understand. So the first step is, are you earning substantial gainful activity? $1,550 a month. That's gross before any taxes are taken out. So, you know, it's even in Seattle where, you know, minimum wage $15, it doesn't take that many hours necessarily to get there. So I think a lot of people get surprised, and $1,550 is not enough to live off of often with rent prices in Seattle. So, you know, it's a semi-low barrier. Severe impairments, kind of a severity requirement. That's what Alex said, the medically determinable impairments. I just wanted to highlight here, unfortunately, Social Security does not recognize substance use disorder as a disability, although it might be medically defined that way. Social Security looks at it, unfortunately, as a is not necessarily a barrier to getting benefits, especially for claimants that have co-occurring medical conditions like a mental health condition and a substance use condition. The medical records can be a little unclear as to what the symptomology is. Sometimes there's overlap. And so Social Security is going to look at, is the substance use disorder material to a finding of disability? In other words, if that person were not using substances, would they still have the same impairment? Or, you know, are the symptoms caused by the substance use disorder and not the impairment? So that's the kind of the balance they look at it. So if the only impairment that the person is claiming is substance use disorder, that's not going to be enough. And in my experience, that's not usually it. There's usually underlying things going on there. Listing criteria is the third step. So this is where Social Security will actually define specific physical or mental health impairment, like epilepsy has a definition, A, B, C, D. Mental health impairments have a definition. They have the symptomology that you have to show a certain number of symptoms, and it has a severity of, you know, and on top of that, you have extreme limitation in 1, 2, 3, 4. So you don't need to know those, but just know Social Security has actually defined these, whether they're accurate, you know, updated enough, they're expanding these over time. But if you meet their exact definition, and they're reviewing evidence to figure that out, as you know, they're looking at medical records. I'll go over, you know, that a little bit more in a second. But there's evidence there that they're looking at. And not everything is black and white, you know, and maybe the medical evidence isn't super clear. So if you are disabled and you meet their listing, they're not going to go any further. They'll find you disabled here. But if you don't exactly meet their definition, they're going to next look at your residual functional capacity for the next 2 steps. Residual functional capacity means your ability to do work with all of your current impairments and limitations. And so I encourage my clients to, when you're applying, list everything that in your belief is what is causing you to be, which you feel is your disabling conditions, as well as things that maybe you don't define as disabling to you, but create limitations. For example, you know, maybe my impairment is mental health impairment, but I hurt my wrist and I can't lift things with my right hand. That's going to prevent you from maybe doing at step 4, your prior relevant work, or at step 5, any other work in the national economy. So your limitations will reduce the jobs that they're going to say you could potentially do. And in practice, what this means is Social Security has vocational experts. I really dislike the way they define disability, by the way. And I don't love especially when they're looking at whether anybody could do this other work. It doesn't mean that work actually exists. It doesn't mean that work exists in Seattle. It doesn't mean those jobs could be obtained. So it's kind of this nebulous thing, and it's hard for claimants to wrap their head around. And I'm just like, I agree with you. It does not make sense, but here we are. So in my experience, if you list all the things that you feel make you meeting their are your disabling conditions, but also anything that creates limitations. Are you not able to stand for certain reasons? You know, anything like that, that's maybe some additional limitations that's going to prevent you from doing certain types of work, list it all. So that's kind of detailed about actually how defining disability. But let's go over what the process actually looks like for a claimant that's applying. You're submitting your application with the field office. And I'll point out, this looks crazy, and it is. So this is why when your claimants feel overwhelmed, they should feel overwhelmed, because this is not an easy process to navigate. There's a lot of steps, and it goes back and forth between agencies. And so it is very easy for somebody to get overwhelmed in this process. So you file your application with the field office. I'll go over how to do that, what options you have. And then you'll notice the big arrow, it goes to the disability investigation portion. It actually goes to DDDS, which is technically part of DSHS in our state, but this is a federal program. So it is not part of our state program, but every state contracts, or excuse me, this is a federal program. So every state contracts with an agency to do the investigation on the ground. That's kind of the way to look at it. They have a DDS adjudicator. It's not a judge, just a state worker. This is where, when you're putting your application, it's going to ask you about all your medical records, where you've seen doctors, what timeframes. It's because this office, and I'm just going to say DDS because these acronyms get insane, but they're requesting records from those facilities with the timeframes that you provide. So be over inclusive. If I'm not sure when I went there, but I know it was sometime in 2020, I'm just going to put January 2020 and get all of the year. If there's not enough current medical evidence, maybe your claimant hasn't gone to the doctor regularly enough, or they stopped going for whatever reason, if it's not current enough, at this stage, they'll ask them to go to a consultative exam or a CE. That is an exam with a doctor that Social Security contracts with. So the doctor will do a physical or mental health exam or whatever's related, vision exam, whatever's related to the impairments that you allege. And then you have to go to that doctor, and that doctor is going to write a report and send it to Social Security. If they find you disabled at that step, you're approved. If you're getting on SSI, you then have to have a meeting with Social Security before you can become in pay. If you get denied, the next stage is you can appeal what's called a request for reconsideration. That's the first appeal. You file that with the field office. All of your appeals and everything still go to the field office. And then they're going to send it back to DDS for a second review. It's usually shorter at this period. They'll make another decision. If you're approved, again, if it's SSI, you have to have a meeting before you can get you in pay. That's because they're evaluating those financial requirements that we talked about before, your resources and income. They've got to make sure that throughout your entire application period, were you still financially eligible? So they'll do that, then you can become in pay. If you're denied at this stage, then you have to request a hearing with an administrative law judge. You request that. Those hearing options, it can be in-person, video, and then telephone. During the pandemic, they were all remote, telephone mostly. And then now I'm seeing them more and more being scheduled in person, but they're still keeping remote options. So if your claimants want that. If you get denied again, there's more appeal. You can appeal. I just reiterated the hearing there, so that's the same. But if you get denied again, you can appeal to the Appeals Council. That is still with Social Security. That's their National Appeals Council. So all of the appeals go to that office. They can agree to take the case and review it. More often than not, what happens at this stage is they deny or they dismiss it. They don't have a reason to review. But if they can. Technically, I think at that stage, they can decide, oh, we're just going to approve it, but they don't. They remand it back to the administrative law judge. If they agree there was an error with the judge's decision, they will remand it back to the administrative law judge to have a supplemental hearing. The appeals council stage, you cannot submit new evidence. It's just, did the judge make an error? And then you can deny yet again after that stage with the federal court. We do not do the federal court appeals, at least as of right now. We refer them to private attorneys, but we work best. So if it gets remanded, the federal court can then remand it to the hearing office yet again for yet another supplemental hearing. And that does occasionally happen. This is where I'm answering the question that was brought up in the chat. More often than not, you should appeal. the reason I say this is because when you apply, the earliest date you tell Social Security you want to apply is what's called your protective filing date. I shorten that here to PFD. So from the date you apply, or you tell Social Security you're going to apply, like you call and make an appointment, the clock starts running. And if you get approved for benefits, for SSI, you can get benefits going all the way back to that date. So if this appeal has taken a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's a lot of benefits that your claimant could get. The other reason why I don't encourage people to necessarily reapply every time is because the previous decision becomes a final decision, and that changes things. The burden then shifts to the applicant to say that there's a presumption of non-disability because they just made a decision that became final that you were not disabled. And now you have to show that there's some change in circumstance. So that might be that you have a new or worsening condition, and there's some various other things. That's a generally easy hurdle to overcome, but it is there. And so I find that the field offices tend to tell people to reapply, especially if they're late and they say, oh, well, you've been denied. That was, 6 months ago. You need to reapply. But you can appeal and file late with that good cause. It doesn't mean they'll reopen it and they'll go to the previous stage if your only reason was I didn't get the notice, whatever. It means that you can reopen that claim, but you need to go to the next level of appeal. So you can appeal late. Like we said earlier, the claimant needs to say a good cause statement of late filing. Good cause means I have a good reason for filing late. For example, I was unhoused. I didn't receive the notice. I had moved and didn't get the mailed notice. I was in the hospital. My mental health impairments got in the way. I didn't understand it and I needed help. Those kind of things. And generally that's enough. There is a time frame, without getting into the weeds, there is a time frame like after a certain number of years, and it's different SSI versus SSDI. Generally SSI, I think, is like 2 years. After that, you'll have to reapply. But if it's generally within, 2 years, I think DI, you have actually 4 years. But if it's late, you can try to appeal late with good cause in most cases. And I think that's preferable to just reapplying. So how you can help. One, help them schedule an appointment or complete an application. I should have put the other slide before this one, but it's going to show, you can apply online, you can ask them for a phone call, just helping them get the actual appointment set up and helping them meet that appointment or helping them apply online. This gets to the question that was asked earlier, gathering materials needed for an application. I put a link here to the checklist, but it's generally your basic background information, including, marriage and citizenship status, your work history background going back 15 years, and your medical information, which includes, all of the treatment from the date that you're saying you became impaired till now. Who are the providers? What time frames you're getting seen by those? They know where to request records. I think one of the biggest things you can do to help initially is helping them establish a mailing address if they don't already have one, and encouraging them to check their mail. I've also had case managers that check mail with a client that has trouble checking their mail regularly. So when they do their weekly check-in or whatever it is, asking them about their mail, because this is the primary way Social Security is going to communicate with you during the application process. And really in any stage, Social Security, for whatever reason, mail is it. And so they're going to send notice by mail. So there's deadlines on those notices. Well, if you miss it, you're not checking your mail, you're going to miss that notice and you're going to be late. So you can set up a general delivery or, go to Compass Housing or whatever it is. If your agency has a mailing address that clients can use, that's super helpful. It's also not too late to connect them to providers. For example, if you know somebody needs referred to something specific, like they lost connection to their mental health provider and they haven't been going in a while, get them started now when they're on application if they're interested in getting that treatment, because this process is going to take a long time. So it is all that stuff. Ultimately, your appointments, the case notes, the evaluations that the providers do, that's going to become evidence for this claim. So this is a lengthy process, so it's not too late to get them started, and helping your client stay engaged in the process. So helping them check their mail, helping them respond to deadlines. If they miss something, they can ask for an extension, especially at the DDS level. When DDS is doing the investigation, they're going to send questionnaires. They may schedule them for a CE. You want to make sure that they're meeting those deadlines. And then if for some reason they need more time to fill out this form, this questionnaire, you ask for an extension. I will say, if you're not fully representing a client, the client needs to be present while you're making those calls. And again, if you're late, submit a statement as to why you're late for those things. Especially in the situation of a notice from Social Security. With DDS, you don't need to do this statement of claimant, good cause, but if they got a notice of you were denied and they didn't respond within those 60 days, you can file late. And then again, referrals to BLC, we've already gone over kind of how to do that. So how do you apply online? Like we said, you can set up a MySSA account. It is hard to do. Phone appointment. I think the easiest way for a case manager, if you're not able to even help the client through the application, is help them set up a phone appointment. Call Social Security with them, ask for an appointment, help them keep that appointment, and set the reminders. The other way that's hands-off for you is connecting them with DSHS, who has, especially for claimants that want to apply for SSI, they have SSI facilitators who will help them apply. They'll do the applications with them and for them and submit them. And I thought they ended after the application stage, but I've even had a client come to me where their SSI facilitator helped them appeal a denial as well. The first thing I skipped over was there's an online filing tool for SSI specifically. If you click that link, it'll direct you there. And that is designed to say, I want to apply for SSI, and then it prompts Social Security to then send a notice with an appointment date to the claimant. I personally have not found this to be successful because it means, like, especially the clients that come to us generally don't have mailing address, they have all these other barriers, but it means that Social Security then has to follow through with an appointment setting and it coming in the mail and them actually seeing it in time in the mail and all that stuff. So, that's hit or miss, but you can try it and maybe it'll work for you and your client. Phone appointment, SSI facilitator. If they can get into their MySSA account, you can do an online application. Particularly for SSDI, for disability insurance, you can do that all online. That can be done solely online. If you have an SSI application, you also then have to follow up with a signature. If you're helping someone do that online, it may send them something in the mail to sign, or you can preemptively mail that to them. They want the wet physical signature for an SSI application. If you're helping a client set up a MySSA account, this was my cautionary tale earlier, please make sure that they know how to get access to that later. I personally have a hard time helping. I've tried a few times to help a client set this up and it just hasn't been successful. So I don't spend a lot of time doing it. But, make sure they know how to get back into it, or at least they know what email address you used, keep all of that documented in your file so that if someone comes back later and you're not working at your agency, that they know what you did. There are paper applications. In previous training, I gave you the list of what paper applications you can do, but unfortunately, we've had Social Security reject those if it's not coming from a professional agency like ours. We've had an individual client, where we just gave advice and counsel, the person was able to manage the process themselves. They hand delivered paper applications and they Social Security would not accept those and made them do a phone application, which was silly. But we did do a full training on applications, and I put the link here. It's a YouTube link where we recorded the training we did specifically on applications, how to help a client apply. So I encourage you to look at that when you have time, if you really are interested in helping clients apply, because I think it's really an administrative. There's not a lot of legal work going on at the beginning, other than we know what Social Security is looking for and we're helping them, but it's really an administrative process until we get to the hearing. We're not doing a ton of legal work, quote unquote. We're helping our clients through this process. So this is something you absolutely can do and would be super helpful for our community if you're interested in it. And lastly, I'm just putting this in here so you can go back and refer to it later. Social Security during the pandemic decided to change all of their, you can look up what field office a claimant should be in based on their residential address. And we have information there, but during the pandemic, they took their local field office phone numbers off their website. And if you click on the local field office link, it has every single one has the national 1-800 number, but we know what the local office phone numbers are. So here they are for you. If you need to help a client find a local field office, here it is. You can go back and refer to it in the future. I just want to put this here to explain why medical information is important, so that you can, as you're gathering evidence for them or maybe helping them prepare what to put on their forms. The time frame is important here because one, you're saying what's the onset date of my disability? If you are applying for disability insurance, you need to still be considered insured under their program, which, the slide we had earlier, we were talking about work credits. Those work credits expire over time. The funds are still there. in retirement, so you can access them later. But your work credits, to be insured under that program and get the disability insurance portion of it, you have to say you were disabled before those work credits expire. And a general rule of thumb is within 5 years of when you stopped working, your disability, your disabling conditions had to have started. So one, that there's a time frame that you need to be aware of. Also, if you're alleging these conditions, try to be as inclusive of the providers from that allegation date until now. If you know you had a provider that you haven't seen in 2 years, but they diagnosed you, try to include that. Also, I think the bigger picture here is this provides a historical picture, maybe some patterns. I've had a lot of clients that experience maybe ups and downs and like how often they're going and getting treated, but that could be evidence of their condition, particularly with mental health, where they're not feeling well, so they're self-isolating or whatever the situation is. So there might be patterns there, or it also shows your effort. I've attempted to do this. I have, for example, I'm just thinking of one off the top of my head, the diagnosis of epilepsy. The definition under Social Security's process, there are at step 3, they have a definition on epilepsy. One of them is that you have breakthrough seizures despite compliance with medical treatment. That's part of the definition for that diagnosis. And so we need to show, are you following the treatment? What are your doctors saying about that? But also, I've tried all these things and it's still not working. That's important. So now getting to supporting materials and how you can help. So one, I mentioned earlier about DDS. I just want to remind myself to answer your question specifically. So when the case goes to DDS is going to take the information on your forms that you've submitted to Social Security, and they're going to request records from all those places. You can call DDS and ask them, with the claimant, what other information do you need? Do you have anything? If you know there's something specific, like records, specialized assessments, send it to them. Ask them, how can I send this to you? Can they send you a barcode, or can can the claimant send it in somehow? Or, specifically identify those tests. There are forms that ask about what tests and things you've had done. Include that information in there if you know about it. Another way you can support their claim, especially if this is someone you're interacting with regularly and you know this person, you can write a letter of support, especially as a case manager. There's letters of support, medical letters of support. If you have a medical degree or something that, some type of specialty, you can make some opinions about that specialty, but otherwise, you can still provide letters of support, particularly with your personal observations. That's the focus. You want to show, what have you observed with this claimant? What activities can they not perform or are visibly difficult? Do they need extra breaks? Are they having trouble remembering appointments? Do you have to help them open their mail? Do they have difficulty interacting with people? Have you seen them have like outbursts that might match what their diagnoses are? Have you seen them physically in pain or, limping? What your personal observations are really helpful. And I've in fact had a claim approved after a hearing, and the judge's opinion specifically identified the letter of support from the case manager, who, because it corroborated the evidence that was in the medical file. So it can be really helpful. I would caution you to not say that the claimant is disabled and cannot work. Unfortunately, in this context, it is technically a legal decision, and the judges don't like when we step on their toes. So really focus on how the impairments are affecting their daily life. The effect of that impairment, not necessarily the cause, unless maybe the diagnosis because it's referred within your program to this provider, but you're not making the medical opinion necessarily, but you're showing how those medical diagnoses may affect their life. Other ways to help your client stay engaged. When you're submitting materials with them or helping them submit materials, please keep copies in your files, because maybe later on, a year down the road, you're at an appeal and now you need help from BLC. If you have copies of the notices that you have from Social Security, or if you have copies of the application, that's super helpful, because we don't have access to that until maybe we need to, and that would help us know, should we take this case? Or, we can give you advice more specific if we know what's going on in your case or what stage it's at. So please keep copies of it. Often things get stuck at various levels, like Alex was talking about with severe understaffing within Social Security. So, when you submit the application, you might need to call the field office with the handy list we gave earlier, and check in. Rule of thumb, they're not going to look at an application for at least 2 months, because they're so behind. But, after that, maybe checking in every so often. Did you receive it? Are you missing anything? Anytime you call Social Security, if you're not representing them, the claimant needs to be present. They will not talk to you, but what else do you need? Can I help you? Eventually, once it gets transferred to DDS, DDS will assign an adjudicator. There is a main number for DDS, and I forgot to put it. I'll drop it in the chat when they do the last 30 minutes. So I'll put it in the chat, the DDS number, but you can call DDS and ask for the name of the, do you have this claim yet? What's the name and specific phone number of the claimant for this, or of the DDS adjudicator. At this stage, when it's at DDS is when stuff's going to happen fast. So notices are going to come from DDS that say, we need to fill out this questionnaire. You have 10 days to do it. But that, maybe you got it in the mail and it's due in 2-3 days with the way the weekends work. So try to fill it out. But if you don't respond within the 10 days, call them, ask for an extension. This is where they're pretty easy to work with. You can reach a person on the phone at DDS. At DDS is also where they're going to schedule those consultative exams. The notice is going to come from DDS. It says, we have scheduled an appointment on this day and time at this location. And the claimant needs to attend. If for some reason they absolutely can't, call and ask it to be rescheduled. But if the claimant just misses it, in my experience, they will only reschedule that one more time if it's the claimant's fault that they missed it. DDS can provide transportation. They need to ask for it. If you can help your client get to it, you have a service maybe within your agency where you can help clients get to appointments and help them make that appointment, that would be super helpful. I think for claimants, especially feel more comfortable to have somebody go with them. And if they get approved when it's an SSI claim, then they have that meeting, the pre-effectuation review conference meeting with Social Security, which is right now is just a phone call that says they're going to ask you all those questions about the claimant about financial eligibility. So they cannot be in pay until that meeting happens. So it's really important that they attend that. And also keeping them on top of deadlines. It's 60 days, plus they give you an extra 5 days for mailing. Again, if it's late, you can file late. Oops, I think it's stuck. Okay, there we go. So this is a long process. The application itself, if you're doing an online application, 1 to 2 hours, it could be longer to actually fill it out depending on how much information the client has. So often it takes me more than one meeting, multiple meetings to help a client fill out an application. If you do it online, keep the reentry code. The only way you can get back to that online application is with the reentry code they give you, and it's valid for 60 days, which means if you want to keep that protected filing date, you need to finish that online application within 60 days. For your initial decision on an application, those are taking around 9 to 12 months. You submit it to the field office. They're not going to look at it for at least 2 months. Within 60 to 90 days, then it'll move to DDS. And they have told me that it's about a 30-day wait for them to even assign an adjudicator. Then the adjudicator gets it and they have to work up the case. And so that could be very dependent on which adjudicator you get. Could take 3 to 6 months, could take longer, especially if you need CEs. You get approved. If you get denied and you file an RFR, you'll get a decision faster, maybe around 6 months. And then if you want a hearing and you're requesting a hearing, I think it's still about 9 months out, roughly. It could be 9 to 12 to request a hearing if it's an eligibility hearing. The hearings I have that are scheduled now for April were requested at kind of last summer. So that's about 9 months. Now we're getting to post-eligibility stuff. And I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible so we have plenty of time for questions. There's a lot of things you need to report to SSA. And I'm going to put all of these up here and just highlight a few. There's many things more than we've listed here that you need to report to SSA. When you get on benefits, there are strings attached. And you need to, first and foremost, notify Social Security about any address change. They're going to primarily communicate with you by mail and send notices like a continuing disability review. And if you miss that, it's your fault because you didn't tell them what your new address was. Also, if your living situation changes, that could change what level of benefit you get. I'm going to go over that in a minute. You could have a reduction if you've moved in with somebody and you're not paying rent, you're couch surfing. Subsidized housing does not count towards that. If you start working, you need to notify them. And if you're working while you're getting these benefits, you must report your report your income every month. That is so important because it affects your benefits in a huge way. If you get unearned income, you need to report it. As soon as you get it, you need to report it. If you get tribal income, you must report that monthly also, which is another huge barrier and is difficult sometimes for claimants to do. And if you get some things that weren't expected, like personal injury settlements, gifts, child support, that's all stuff that needs to be reported. We mentioned earlier, the resource limit is so low. There's always legislation to try to change that. There is some that's pending. I hope it happens because it's not been changed for decades. It is only $2,000 for an individual, only $3,000 for a married couple. So, you know, if you are not staying under that resource limit, you need to notify them and get under resource within the next month so that you don't have it happen month after month. And this other last one I wanted to highlight, if you are detained, and that means that could be incarceration, but it could also be involuntary commitment. It could be you are in a hospital. I think there's a certain definition of what hospital qualifies there. I think it's a Medicaid facility. You're not eligible for benefits that month. If it's longer than 12 months, you're terminated. So consecutively. So that's something that you need to report and you need to be aware of. And there's a lot of anything else changing, like major changes in your life, marital changes, citizenship status. Technically, if you medically improve, you're supposed to notify them. If you leave the US, all that kind of stuff. Specifically talking about income, the reason why like working is considered earned income. So there's kind of an incentive where they'll only reduce your benefits $1 for every $2 you earned. So, you know, there is a scenario where you can get SSI and you're working, but not working too much. And so you're getting some SSI, it's getting reduced, but not by dollar for dollar. So you're getting a little more work income. And then overall, you're getting more money than just the SSI max. But here's where you need to be careful because there is that substantial gainful activity limit that we talked about. And that's $1,550 per month gross before taxes are taken out. So one, if you're working above that, you get zero benefit for that month. And for my clients that are working seasonal work or just super inconsistent, can't really keep a job, but they like accidentally worked really, you know, for this month and the next month, that means they don't get a benefit. And they're behind on reporting. So you report it, technically, if you report it exactly on time, and then 2 months later is when the payment for that month is coming. So it's, you know, you just need to be aware that that's going to happen. And also we've had claimants that are on SSI are not really like kind of familiar with these rules. And then they get a raise and they think that's great, but they know like, oh, I can work 20 hours and be fine, or I can work 15 hours and be fine, but they get a raise. And now suddenly they're over SGA. So be aware of that. And the other kind of factor here, when you start working, now we get to a potential issue with, are you disabled under their rules, Social Security's rules? And that's step one, substantial gainful activity. So when you have a continuing disability review, which happens every few years for everybody that's on a disability benefit, and you've been working, maybe they're going to say you're not disabled anymore and you have improved to the point that you're not disabled under their rules. So, you know, that's something. It may not be the end of the world. Maybe for some people, that's a better scenario where they're going to be working, making more money than they would get on SSI anyways. And now they're paying money into potential retirement, or if they become disabled again in the future, they could reapply for disability insurance. But for a lot of my clients, that is just so hard to swallow because they have worked so hard and spent so much time trying to get on benefits in the first place. And then just another reiteration, you must report every month. This could be an overpayment issue. With disability insurance, there's way more complicated rules than we have time to go into here, but it affects disability insurance in a different way. And there's actually a different work limit. There's a trial work period. Well, if you start working and you're on disability insurance, I believe for 2024, it's $1,110. If you work above that limit, they're going to count that as a month. And there's no consequences for 9 months of doing that. And then after that period, there's an extended period of eligibility that only lasts for 36 months. If you go above SGA, you don't get a benefit, but it's only lasts for 36 months. And then after that, if you go above SGA, you're terminated. So that's all to say. Just know that if you're on SSDI and you want to start working, the clock starts running. Timely responding to SSA, you can help your clients when they are on benefits to, one, remember to check your mail regularly, or if you've moved and you have notify Social Security about your mail. And if you're not sure what's going on, periodically check in with them maybe, because they could have sent a notice that they missed, particularly with continuing disability reviews. If you appeal or if you respond to a continuing disability review timely, your monthly benefits continue during that review. But if after a certain period, if you haven't responded, they will pause your benefits. And I have several clients right now that are in this boat where we have responded late because they came to me after their benefits stopped. We find out it's a continuing disability review. We submit the paperwork, but their benefits have not restarted. It is not an automatic restart because of the way Social Security systems are. It's not an easy, just like click of a button. I wish it was. So that's something to be aware of. If you don't stay on top of this, your benefits could be paused or terminated, and then it's way harder to get it fixed later. Similarly, if they have an overpayment notice, you need to respond to that, because if you appeal within a certain period of time, your benefits can continue during the appeal. But if you've appealed late, it's hard to get them turned back on. Also, change in benefits notices. They might send you a notice that says you're getting a reduction of benefits to 0, or you're getting a, or they're sending you a termination notice. Those are really important. Respond to those so their benefits can continue at the current amount while that appeal is going on. And just another way to prevent some SSI benefits reductions. This is a big one that we see where people think and are trying, and they're trying to help out somebody that's on SSI for various reasons. And it's a good, it's a good impulse, but I don't think a lot of people realize what Social Security is going to react, how they're going to react to that. And it could create a negative consequence for the claimant or beneficiary. So for example, a client lives with another person and doesn't pay rent. So that would be, I'm couch surfing, or, I'm just hanging out with my friend's house. I've been unhoused. They're kind enough to let me stay with them for a few months. I'm not paying rent. They're going to count that as an in-kind support and maintenance, and they're going to reduce their benefit up to 1/3. Now in Seattle, that could be a good deal, because 1/3 of 900, like 300 some bucks, way cheaper than you could find rent anywhere in Seattle. And sometimes that's the best solution. You can get around that by doing a lease agreement, written lease agreement, and submitting it, but then you're probably paying more to that person. And some people prefer that. Like, they know I have a family arrangement. I'm staying, with my mom. I'm an adult that has a disability, but I would rather pay my mom rent and just keep the difference. Keep fair rental value. I'd rather pay more to my mom than let the government keep some of my money. That's fine. If they get in subsidized housing, that doesn't count. So that's a great solution. If you help your client find subsidized housing, there's not going to be an ISM reduction. If someone pays their rent directly to the rental company, and that's also an ISM reduction. So I've had that where like a parent paid rent for an adult child, that's an ISM reduction. But if the parent paid the money to the child and then the child paid the rent, that's different. That is income, and they will count that dollar for dollar. So if they paid the child $700 to pay their rent, that's $700 that's coming out of their SSI versus $300 that might just be an ISM reduction. The other thing to know is about unearned income. There could be some ways around that depending on the scenario. For example, if there's a personal injury settlement that's coming, maybe a special needs trust could set up or is put in an ABLE account. So those are exempted from Social Security's what's considered a resource. Those might be case-by-case basis. If you've got a scenario like that, check in with BLC or another legal services agency, and maybe we could help you figure that out. And the last thing to say is just making sure your client is not going over-resourced. Even by $1, they are going to say that person gets 0 SSI for that month. So helping your clients manage their funds and budget and stay under resource every month, I think could be just a helpful thing to keep in mind when you're checking in with your clients that they're getting SSI. Are you saying, are you keeping your amount under resource? Do you need any help figuring out how to spend your money? There are some exceptions where like somebody's been in the hospital. If they've been in a hospital, I think there's like up to 90 days. I think there's an exception where they're not going to count that because they know the person couldn't spend that. So maybe you can help somebody spend down. Or if they were over-resourced one month, they're not going to be eligible for that month. And then going forward, it's going to still be a resource unless they spend down. So helping that person stay on top of that and manage that could be a really helpful tool for you to do with your clients. And I hope I saved enough time for questions. So I'll open up to you, Jody.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. That was really rich information. I am just going to quickly check in with Daniela and make sure that they got their question from the previous section answered about denials. I think that you covered that pretty well, but I want to make sure Daniela didn't have anything else. So Daniela, maybe give us something in the chat that is like, you're good.
Yeah, I think it answered it. I got more information out of it than I was expecting. But yeah, super helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's what we like to hear. We had somebody put in the comment, I've had many clients inform me that after getting denied by the administrative judge, they have to reapply all over. Is that true? And is it determined by SSA?
That is not true. If you get denied by the administrative law judge, you can appeal to the appeals council. And when the claimant they'll get a written decision from the administrative law judge, and it'll have a notice of decision on top of that, which will talk about appeal rights. And you can appeal to the appeals council. And I would encourage that. The administrative law judge can't say in their opinion, you can appeal. that's an absolutely a due process, right?
Thank you. When a client is in detention with SSDI or SSI, is it just suspended or canceled? And do you have to start all over again? And if it's suspended, for how long? And does electronic home detention count as being in detention?
I will, so with detention rules, it is paused while they're in detention, like I mentioned, only if they're, for SSI, it is if they're in detention for a full calendar month. So, you know, that'd be, and it depends on the month, how many days are in the month, but it's a full calendar month. So if you get in, if you were incarcerated today, it wouldn't be unless you were incarcerated for all of February. If you got out before the end of February, you shouldn't be paused for, but if you are incarcerated or detained for 12 consecutive months, you will be terminated after that time. So when you get out, if it's shorter than that, you just notify Social Security that you've been released, and Social Security will restart your benefits the next calendar month, I think. I can't remember exactly the date that you'll be, but notify Social Security and they'll be able to tell you when your next benefit will start. And they should restart. And that can happen multiple times. So, you know, you go in, come out, you go in, come out. But if you are for a consecutive period of 12 months, after that point, you are terminated. If you want to get back on benefits, you have to reapply after you're terminated. The term terminated is within Social Security. That's their terminology to say your benefit, this claim has ended. And if you want benefits, you have to file a brand new claim. If you are on home detention, I'm not 100% sure on that. If you have a specific situation, email us and we can look at it. But my inclination is it would not count because the reason why they have these rules is because the government is paying for your living situation when you're, I think, at least if I'm remembering the policy behind it, is that, you know, if you're in a Medicaid paid facility, Medicaid is paying for your stay. If you're in, you know, incarcerated, that's, you know, government paid facility. If you're in voluntary commitment, that's a government paid facility. So that's why they're not paying you that benefit. They're paying it to that facility instead. So if you're on home detention, they're not paying for where you're living. So I don't think that would count, but we could look into it. If you have a specific scenario, email us.
Yep, and I've posted a link to 2 publications on Washington Law Help about what you should know before going into incarceration and what to know when you get out. And that has more specific information. I agree, we don't know about home detention, but my guess is that it probably wouldn't count, but we'd have to research it.
Thank you both. So I'm looking at the time, and we've got one more question that hasn't already been asked. So I'm going to focus on that, but someone did throw in that question again about the online accounts and how hard they are. So I'm going to encourage that person to take a look at the recording when Tim sends it out, because Hillary and we and Alex talked about that at great length in the earlier section here. So it's clearly an issue that's on folks' mind and they're navigating. So I'm going to, for the sake of time, focus on the last question here. Do subsidies like hen rental subsidy count as unearned income? And I'm going to turn it to Hui here in a sec, but we are really lucky to have Trisha Matthew on the call with us. And there's been a number of different, you know, very specific hen questions coming in the chat that Trisha's been answering. So I will let you all refer to that. Trisha, I don't know if you are able or willing to put in the best contact for hen for folks to follow up on that, just so we can kind of stay focused on, I think you had some important information about a subsidy like hen. So I'm going to hand it to you, Hui.
Yeah, essentially, when someone qualifies, excuse me, when someone qualifies for SSI, their hen eligibility stops, especially the aspect of housing. However, there are small subsets of folks in King County and other places that may qualify for discretionary, on a discretionary basis for hen. And Trisha talks about the program that she's involved with that helps people maintain their hen benefits while on SSI. Public housing generally should not be counted as unearned income, much like SNAP benefits, like food benefits or Section 8 vouchers. But if you do experience problems with hen and seeing folks' SSI amount being reduced as a result, let us know. Hillary, is that correct? Hen should not be counted as unearned income, is that right?
Yeah, I have clients that are on the continuation program, so they're receiving HEN and SSI. And any subsidized housing is an exception to that resource ISM rule.
Yep, and we've seen some problems with foster care. So that's another thing where someone gets foster care income or stipends. And so we've been told that the Social Security has been trying to reduce that, which they should not. That's foster care housing. And so that's a big problem also. We tried to advocate for the state regulations to extend HEN beyond SSI for everybody. But currently, financially, in the state of Washington, that's not happening. Maybe with the next session, there'll be more efforts to try to maintain HEN after SSI eligibility. But it is, in many cases, for some folks, not an opportunity that they have to remain on HEN because of finances and regulations. And so hopefully that will change. And we'll try to advocate for that for our clients.
Thank you both so much. This was super helpful and wonderful. I'm going to hand it back to Tim, and I'm going to throw our post-survey link in the chat one more time. So Tim, I'll take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we have a couple of quick things to talk about before we take a much-deserved break. And I'll talk a little bit more about what follows the break. But I do just want to thank all of our wonderful presenters from Benefits Law Center. We really appreciate your time and expertise. This has been a wonderful updated presentation, and we certainly hope to work together again. So just thanks for hanging out with us again. We really appreciate it. Please share on that that feedback survey, how it went. We always get very positive feedback from Benefits Law Center when there are guests, but we want to know if there's anything that we can improve upon to make sure that this is a great experience for providers. Awesome. Okay.